appreciate the opportunity to speak with the class, Rob. What I thought I'd do, first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Maybe just give you a very quick just a summary of my background. And then one of the things I'd like to do is just chat a little bit initially about some of the differences between the Canadian intercollegiate athletics and the NCAA. I think there's a lot of misperceptions, misunderstandings, really myths about athletics here, and certainly a number of ways in which is very different. I'm Canadian, but all of my education was in the U.S. Undergrad, master's degree, and a PhD at Ohio State. I've had the opportunity to coach at Ohio State, also at the University of Windsor, where my star defenseman was a little guy named Robb Serviss. And also the athletic director at University of Calgary for 12 years. And during my time at Calgary, I had the opportunity to serve as president of what was then called the CIAU, which is now CIS. And it was a wonderful experience, and I really have a great deal of respect for those folks who are managing athletic programs at Canadian universities. Since Calgary, I've been at the University of Calgary, or University of California, Berkeley, then University of Minnesota, and for the last 13 years at the University of Vermont. So I've had really a good opportunity to have some in-depth experience in both Canada and the U.S. And what I'd like to do at this point really is just chat a little bit about some of the differences between the two, just to give people a kind of perspective on how things are in some cases radically different, and in some ways where they're much the same. I guess the first, just looking at the CIS, and also recognize there's also CCAA, which in many ways is very similar with CIS, but I'm much less familiar with it than with the CIS. CIS has approximately 65 members. The NCAA, on the other hand, there's 1,100 members. So it's a huge difference in terms of the scope of the number of members, and really we have NCAA members with 1,500 students, and we have NCAA members with 55,000 students. So there's a tremendous disparity and diversity within the membership. In the CIS, all the schools compete together. There's really no divisional alignment, whereas in the NCAA we have 3 divisions, each with separate championships. And there are 88 national championships that the NCAA operates, and whereas I think the CIS is 21, I believe. Just in terms of the organizational effort around the 2 programs, the CIS National Office has 12 professional staff. The NCAA, on the other hand, they're located in Indianapolis, Indiana, have a huge complex there, and there's about 500 professional staff, and in addition to those, really hundreds of contractors that they work with. The NCAA, the annual operating budget is $780 million, which is substantially greater than the CIS, where I would anticipate their budget is somewhere in the $8 or $9 million range. One of the things that's important to understand as well, scholarships. Scholarships are only available to athletes in Division 1 and 2. Division 3 is really need or merit-based aid only. In the CIS, there are scholarships available, but pretty restricted in terms of how much money athletes can receive. Here, athletes can receive up to the full cost of attendance. So it's room, board, books, tuition, fees, and that cost of attendance, which we'll touch on a little bit later. and it accounts for a lot of how the two countries have evolved very differently in terms of their management of intercollegiate athletic programs. In Canada, the intercollegiate athletics really they're primarily, almost exclusively, for the benefit of the participant. That they really, truly are student-athlete centered. The focus is on how participation in these programs really can enhance the educational experience. And certainly, there's some interest in the student body generally and how athletics can impact on campus spirit and that sort of thing. But there's a very limited external role or purpose for athletics in Canada. It really is focused on the student athlete. In the U.S., it's evolved differently in that while there's a strong focus on the participant, but universities also use athletics as what we call the front porch to the university. It really is the way that so many citizens, community members, how they access campus. So there's a real purpose for alumni, for the community, for legislative engagement, for institutional profile, branding, and what's really become a very important factor or important piece of athletic programs here is enrollment management, how they recruit students. We have a very different system in terms of how universities are supported here. And in Canada, all of the institutions are really government funded, whereas here there's some government funding, but there's a great deal of pressure on universities to generate their own revenue. And as an example, the University of Vermont, we get 8% of our operating budget. That's the institution, not just athletics, but the institute, we get 8% of our operating budget from the state legislature. So that means we have to raise or generate 92% of the budget for the university. So we're much more tuition driven. That means much more focused on recruiting students. It's not simply being gatekeepers, but really is something that we have a very active admissions office, recruitment officers who are all over the country really recruiting students. Not talking here about student athletes, but just students generally. But athletics becomes a very important part in terms of providing a profile. And it's very interesting to see how enrollment application spike after a school has a national championship or has had significant exposure on national television. So that really is a fundamental difference that drives a lot. That in Canada, it's really focused around the participant. In the U.S., it's much more. There certainly is focus on the participant, and that's very important for athletic departments. But the institutions utilize the athletic programs in a much more proactive way. Then I just before we get out of giving your students some opportunity to ask some questions, I just thought it'd be worthwhile to chat a little bit about some things that are really misunderstood and particularly with Canadians, where they're not exposed to the NCAA on a daily basis. And the first, I just want to mention that the 88 national championships that in the three divisions that the NCAA operates. Out of those 88, 5 are revenue positive, and that's men's basketball, men's ice hockey, wrestling, men's lacrosse, and baseball. Each of those championships, those 5 championships, generate anywhere from, and I'm just talking about not television rights, but just the games themselves, the tickets sold, that sort of thing. Each of those generate from anywhere from 30 million to, I think, down to 5 million a year. So there is the sense that every national championship makes a bundle of money. The fact is they don't. There's 5 that do. One of the other things that's gets a little bit complicated. There's a belief in Canada and certainly in the U.S. that we now have a Division One, the FBS National Football Championship. That is not an NCAA national championship. The National Football Championship really is operated by FBS, which is a group of 65 schools, and they take all of the revenue that comes with those championships, but the championship itself is operated under NCAA regulation. But it is not an official NCAA championship. It's just this thing that's kind of off by the side. The bulk of revenue, you have a $700 million annual budget. You need a pretty substantial source of revenue, and I think it's about 90% of the NCAA's budget comes from television rights for the men's basketball championship. All of the other championships are really bundled in that one deal. So we have it's a 13-year agreement, which was just renegotiated last year, and it's about an $11 billion contract over those 13 years. So a pretty substantial amount of money, but it all is
basketball.
This is men's basketball. Wow. And that, as I say, that's where the bulk of the revenue for the NCAA comes from. And to be fair, it is something that is shared. We get annual grants from the NCAA for a variety of things. Certainly, none of that would occur with that men's basketball championship. So that's one myth to appreciate. Second, is there's a sense that every student athlete gets on a full ride scholarship, and that's simply not the case. First of all, there's only Division II and Division I that are allowed scholarships. Division II has some real restrictions in terms of the number of scholarships that they're allowed to offer per sport. And the Division I has restrictions as well, although not as many as there are in Division II. The reality is there's about 30% of athletes who are on full scholarships. The others are either partial scholarship or walk-on athletes where they're not getting any financial support at all. And just as an example, at Vermont, we have approximately 425 athletes competing in 18 sports, and we provide 150 equivalency or the equivalence of 150 full scholarships. So let's just use our hockey team as an example. We have 28 athletes on the roster. The NCAA only allows us to provide 18 scholarships. So that tells you right there that not everyone is on a full ride. We have some athletes, some hockey players who are, some who are on partial scholarships, and we have some who are on no scholarship at all. And that's very consistent across Division I. It's not just schools our size, but the same applies at Ohio State. They have all the money in the world. They have 25, 28 athletes on the hockey team. They can still only offer 18 scholarships. So there is that belief that every athlete is just wealthy and driving around in Porsches and all sorts of other good things happening to us, but not necessarily the case. And then the other, just the difference between schools at the Division I level is immense. And we're talking a little bit about the Power 5 and what's happening right now, but even within that group of 65, there's tremendous difference. And a good example being Ohio State and Texas. those two schools, their budgets are over $125 million. Whereas a school like Iowa State, their budget might be 55 or 60 million. So even within that group of five, you have a tremendous disparity. Then you move to the rest of us. And our budget at Vermont is approximately $19 million, which is pretty typical for a school our size. So when we're playing, in fact, this weekend our hockey team is playing at Minnesota, who are probably operating with an $80 million budget. We're playing Minnesota with our $19 million budget. There's a number of sports that we have to at least try to compete with schools who have just resources that are so much greater than ours. And as I said, we're a pretty typical school in terms of Division I. We're really a solid mid-major program, but we have to try and compete in a lot of sports with schools that are just so much better resourced than we are. So it really does make a tremendous difference in some real competitive disparities.
What's the difference in, like, if the scholarships are the same, if Minnesota's got 20, is it in recruitment, or where are those resources spent?
A number of things. Just an example being staffing. Minnesota football, let's take any, rather than use a specific example, a Power 5 school. In fact, I saw a team picture of West Virginia basketball just the other day. They had 14 support staff. Now, the NCAA regulates how many coaches you can have, but there's no regulation in terms of non-coaching personnel. So they have 3 full-time assistant coaches, a full-time head coach, a director of basketball operations, and then 9 other people. At a school like ours, we would have the coaching maximums in terms of 3 full-time assistants and a head coach, but we might have 2 or 3 additional staff. So it's any number of things. It's staffing, the service levels that they provide. They would charter everywhere that they play, and one basketball team charter. That's probably a $35,000 to $40,000 trip just for the plane. Whereas we'll fly commercial and we do it for $2,500.
Yeah.
So there's any number of ways in which schools find to spend their money. So the fact remains, though, there's tremendous disparity there, and it really does create some issues. So with that kind of background, what I'd like to do is just touch on a couple of key issues that we're trying to deal with right now. And these are things that have been bubbling for the last couple of years, and certainly are things that are going to continue for quite some time. And I really believe that they're going to result in some more than significant change within Division I in the NCAA. The first, just mention is there have been a couple of challenges recently with the National Labor Relations Board, where not schools but student-athlete groups, they've grouped together and have claimed that they should be treated as employees. And that being the case, that they should have collective bargaining rights, the ability to negotiate a salary, et cetera. Northwestern University, their football team was the first to do this. And about a year ago, they brought that challenge forward to the state labor relations board. on the number of hours they spent practicing, control the coach had, et cetera, et cetera. That then automatically went to the National Labor Relations Board in Washington. And fortunately for us, and we really saw that as being, that could have been catastrophic. The National Labor Relations Board overturned what the state board had said. So that is somewhat of a victory, if you can say that. But they have just appealed, and now the first challenge was with Northwestern, which is a private institution. So now they're challenging public universities, which fall under some different rules. And certainly the hope within the athletic community, at least the administrators, is that the Labor Relations Board will not give them that status of employees, because that changes things completely in terms of the relationship between athletes and coaches and universities. I think it really would be catastrophic to the whole system. The other issue that some of you may have heard is the O'Bannon case, which has been in the courts for several years, and was recently decided in the Circuit Court of California. And this case was all about the NCAA have a number of these video games, and video games are all based on teams, real teams. And Ed O'Bannon was a basketball player at UCLA, and he was featured in a video game with the UCLA team. And he felt that, that's my image. I should be getting paid for that. The NCAA said, no, you signed away your rights. You're an amateur. You can't be paid for this, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the initial ruling was that the NCAA had violated his constitutional rights for compensation. But on appeal, the NCAA won. But putting those two things together, where there's this growing pressure that intercollegiate athletics in primarily basketball and football at the highest level, that has become such a commercial enterprise that the student athletes participating really deserve more compensation, should be treated as employees, et cetera, et cetera. So with all of that swirling around, the top 65 or the Power 5 conferences, who have a great deal of resources sitting in the bank, they felt that we really need to get out in front of this because they were losing the public relations battle. The public was really questioning, how is it that Nick Saban could be making $7 million a year as a football coach, and his star quarterback is getting free room, board, books, tuition, and fees, and that's it. Yeah. There was this tremendous disparity. So they really felt that we've got to do something about this. The interesting thing was they knew that the rest of us who don't have the money that Ohio State does, we can't afford to be paying athletes salary. Can't afford one of the things that they thought they needed to do. We're not different from them in so many ways, and certainly that's one of the major concerns. So given the structure within the NCAA, we have the same boat as Texas. So they knew that they're never going to be able to get these increases through, as long as Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine and those schools are going to be voting on it. So they really pressured hard, and at the convention a year ago, the Power Five conferences were given legislative autonomy, meaning that there are things around student-athlete benefits and welfare that they can pass without involving the other 290 some schools in Division One, and that's where we are right now. That they have legislative autonomy, so they've already passed a series of things which have increased the amount of benefits which they can provide student athletes. The first being they increased the amount that a scholarship is worth. Previously, it was a room, board, books, tuition, and fees. What they changed was to add up to cost of attendance, which means what it costs an athlete to travel back and forth from home, incidental expenses, how much does his Xbox cost, all those sorts of things. So it's in some cases as much as $5,000 added on to the scholarship. And so what athletes are what's happening at the schools who are offering this cost of attendance is the old full scholarship, that's done, they pay that, then the athlete gets a check for $4,500, $5,000. So it really has become a pretty divisive issue because, you know, Vermont, we're still going to, we open our season our basketball season at Florida. So all those Florida athletes are getting a check for $4,000 or $5,000. The ones in Vermont aren't. And it's the same situation across the country. There's even more disparity as a result of these sorts of things. They've also added a number of other types of benefits. Schools can now fly parents to championship games, and certainly the Power Five are to do that. Vermont, not. And most of the other 290 schools outside of that group are not going to be able to afford that either. So as I say, it really is creating some further disparity, and I think it's one of those things that's going to get to that point where why are we continuing to play with these schools? That we have far more in common with Division II schools than we do with them. And I think ultimately we're going to see a further split in the NCAA, and those 65 will go their own way. I think they're going to be forced to stay within the umbrella of the NCAA for antitrust legislative issues. But I do think we're going to get to that point where there'll be a Division 1A and Division 1 for the rest of them.
Will it only be in basketball and football?
Well, that's where it can be tricky because we definitely can't compete in football with those schools. We manage from time to time to be quite competitive in basketball, but schools like Vermont, we do very well in a number of other sports. When you look at lacrosse, hockey, field hockey, there's any number of sports where we can compete with those schools, and that's where it does get a little bit tricky in just in terms of how you get this thing organized. The biggest problem we have with just doing it in football and basketball is we've got this little thing here called Title IX, and immediately that would put any school that separated football and men's basketball out, that they would have to do the same thing on the women's side and provide the same level of benefit for the same number of athletes. So that means somehow you've got to carve out, 100 football players, 15 back, you've got to carve out 150 opportunities on the women's side, so you're in compliance with Title IX. So the Title IX really complicates this whole issue.
Hey, Bob, I got just thought of a question. With that cost of attendance,
Yeah.
would that only go to the kids that have scholarships?
Yeah, yeah.
So the other kids, again, disparity within the team itself.
Right. And that's what, I kind of describe it as coaches with this cost of attendance thing. Coaches are moving more to being general managers than they are coaches.
Yeah.
Because they've got to manage that within the budget, and so you're almost negotiating with athletes. So do you give it to this one? Do you give it to that one? Because it's not something you have to do, but obviously for recruiting purposes, they're really going to use that to put themselves in a better position, and also we know there's a lot of negative recruiting that goes on that put other schools who aren't doing it, put them in a more negative position.
Okay.
So I think that's well, one last thing, just to give you a little bit of perspective. I think we're pretty typical Division I program. We have a budget of $19 million. We have 18 sports here. A professional staff, we've got about 85 full-time people in the department. And probably close to 300 interns and students who perform various functions for us at events and that sort of thing. The university, we get about $7 million of our budget from the university, $4 million from student fees, and we generate the rest, and that comes from ticket sales, fundraising. We have an annual giving campaign which generates about $1 million. So we have to raise about $80 million here. Also, any facility projects that we have are all privately funded. In the last few years, we've built a new field hockey stadium, a new track. We're partway through the new soccer lacrosse stadium, an athletic performance center, and we're just in planning stages for a $65 million event center for hockey and basketball. Sorry?
No, that's good, yeah.
So it means that, aside from the educational goals, which are very, very important for us, we also have some real business objectives that we have to meet. And it means there's just that much more responsibility around organizing, marketing activities, and a big part of that is producing competitive teams that people seem to be more interested in winning teams than losing teams.
So that's your front porch.
Yeah, exactly. And so when the current hockey rink, we seat 3,500 people. We have 800 seats which we hold out for students, and those are gone. We put them they're free for students, so they would be available Monday, and by Tuesday they're gone. So we know there could be a lot more student interest, but we need to sell the remaining seats to the public, and there's a really solid community support for the program here. And I often joke about, although it isn't a joke, that one of the most frequent complaints that I get from the community here is, why do we let so many students into the games? That they kind of see it as, this is their team, and damn those students, what are they doing there? We want to go watch. So we try to explain to them, this is a university, and this really is the students' game, and we appreciate your support. That's the best we can do for you. So, I think that's, I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective of the program here and its like outlets. And a little bit just in terms of what things are like, within Division I level of the NCAA. And I do want to re-emphasize that Division III is a very different piece. It has different objectives, much more like the Canadian schools, although enrollment management and that community connection is very, very important at every level here in the U.S. So, I'm happy to get into any more detail with any of the things that your students would like to hear about or to answer any questions.
Okay, yeah. Hey, start off, somebody have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead. Question, yep. What question you got written down there? In the back there.
Who's the most famous person to attend your school?
The most famous person to attend our school?
Yeah.
You mean an athlete or a...
Athlete, actor, anything.
I'm sorry?
Athlete, actor, politician, anything.
Well, athlete, probably the most notable athlete would be Marty St. Louis, who just retired this past year. Probably Marty, yep, I would say in terms of athletics. There are a number of John Dewey. I don't know if any of you are educational philosophers. John Dewey was a very, very notable educational philosopher, was also a graduate of UM. Calvin Coolidge, one of the early presidents. We've had a few. The school was founded in 1791, so it's got a bit of a history. We've been around for a few years.
Yeah. Okay, what's your question? Yeah. Pick one.
I was just wondering about recruiting, about granting official and unofficial visits.
Okay, with recruiting, official or unofficial visits?
Just what's the difference between them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. In the recruiting process, there really are two: official and unofficial visits. Schools are limited in the number of athletes that they can bring on campus for what are called official visits. And athletes are also limited in the number of official visits which they can take. The difference between an official visit and an unofficial visit is official visits, everything's paid for. Unofficial visit, you're on your own dime. And the way the whole recruiting thing has evolved now, most scholarship offers come as a result of the unofficial visit process, where student athletes or prospective student athletes can go with their parents or whoever and visit. They can visit 50 schools if they want.
Yeah.
And just learn more, find out more, et cetera, et cetera. The official visit thing now is really becoming for basketball. I'll just use it as an example here. We've got three kids that are going to sign in a couple of weeks here for basketball. They've already committed to us. They committed to us after their unofficial visit. So they'll sign their letter of intent, and then we'll use the official visit, but it's more or less just hey, we just want to bring you in so you can meet some people.
Okay.
It's not as much it's not as much of an impact as it once had. Because now recruiting is starting so much sooner. Kids in their freshman, sophomore years are non-official visits to campuses.
Okay,
So
that
it's-
early, wow.
The primary difference though is that one is paid for and the other, and the unofficial or the official visit, each athlete is allowed 5, a maximum of 5.
Okay.
Unofficial visits are unlimited.
Hey, Nevin, what do you got? Question?
I got so many questions.
Well, let's go, so many.
I don't really have a question, Rob.
You don't have one?
I do.
Well, give one.
Ask him number 2. Ask him number 2.
No?
One second.
Okay, let's go right here.
I was wondering if you could discuss the position of athletic director, the institutional control in an intercollegiate sports program.
Didn't catch all of it.
If you could discuss the position of athletic director and institutional control within an intercollegiate sports program.
Okay.
That's one of their questions today, Simon.
That's a good question to ask that, isn't it? Actually, the NCAA have just changed a number of the sanctioning for different violations, and certainly lack of institutional control is one of the worst offenses that a school can be charged with. And what it really suggests is that there are both philosophical, there's an absence of a sound philosophy around the purpose and whatnot, and commitment to NCAA regulations. And there's an absence of control mechanisms. So you're both philosophically in difficulty, and from an organizational standpoint, that you don't have the controls and the management system in place to ensure that these violations aren't going to occur. And what the NCAA has now done is it really dropped when a school is found in violation of whatever it is, that the person who is ultimately the key decision maker in that, they're responsible. So, example, and this is just very timely because this just occurred a week ago. In the past, there would be a lot of violations occur where assistant coaches would supposedly be doing things that the head coach didn't know about. And when those violations came to light, the sanction was always imposed on the person who was directly involved. So the assistant coaches were the ones who were being punished. And the head coach, the strategy was always, I didn't know, and on they went. Well, the NCAA has now changed their process and the philosophy around sanctions, where now it's a case of, if an assistant coach is doing something, the head coach, you should have known. And because you should have known, you're responsible. So with a whole series of recruiting violations, last week, Southern Methodist University were placed on probation. They lost scholarships. They lost. They can't compete in the NCAA tournament. They lost the right to appear on television. and their head coach was suspended for 30% of the season. And the likelihood is that he's ultimately going to be fired. Larry, I don't know if you're familiar, Larry Brown.
Yeah.
He's interesting. He has had 3 college coaching jobs out of, he's been in several NBA teams as well. 3 college coaching jobs, all 3, he's been found in violation of recruiting regulations. So now, for major activities, such as lack of institutional control, that now falls on athletic directors and presidents. So, because it's the same principle that you should have known. You're in a position of responsibility and authority. You should have known. So, in those instances where where they do find a lack of institutional control, it's going to be the athletic director and the president who really is sanctioned. And I think it really is it's a very, very positive step forward for the NCAA, and just in terms of really laying responsibility where it belongs. And certainly as a director, you need to know what's happening through the program.
How do you do that?
Well, I think it starts with who you hire. You're the hiring authority. You should be hiring people that you can trust, that have a philosophy that's consistent with your department and your institution. So that's a key piece, is who is it that you're hiring? Second is, how are you supervising people? Do you have daily contact? Are you in touch? Do you talk to them? Do you know what's going on with them? Do you know that that kid from the east side of Chicago, how is it that he's got a brand new Stingray? You need to know these things. So that means you need to be in touch with your athletes, coaches. You gotta have the pulse of the. And the third thing is, what kind of organization are put together in terms of developing controls? What's your compliance system like? Do you have good compliance staff? Are they experienced? Are they current? Are they working hard?
Yeah.
So it really is a function of who you hire, knowing what's going on, and having a good system in place that really ensures that philosophy and the culture you're trying to develop in a program, that really is being fulfilled through the compliance process.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, who else? Yes.
As a director, do you find yourself favoring one sports team compared to the next? On your,
Do you think they all deserve
do you think they all deserve the same amount of money?
I'm sorry, Rob, I didn't quite hear the question.
As the athletic director, do you find yourself favoring some sports compared to other sports in your program?
You know, like that's a very good question, and I think it's something that really does vary from director to director. Certainly, I think at some of the bigger schools where the financial side of life is much more of a focus point. I think that is the case where the directors earn not their sole attention. The majority of their attention would be football and basketball. That has some real problems. And I think it can create it doesn't work in terms of building a really supportive group, like a team, your coaches. If they see that there's why doesn't he ever come to my games? That's not healthy for the department. So I think here we really work hard at trying to develop a sense within our staff and certainly within our athletes that we're all in this together, and every athlete here is as hard as every other athlete. And the fact that there are a couple of sports where a lot more of the public are interested, that doesn't diminish the impact that the program should have on the individual athletes. It certainly doesn't diminish the efforts that our coaches and student athletes put into their training and competition. So I think it really does become, what's your philosophy? And what kind of department are you trying to operate? If you're in that business model and you're really focused on that, I think you can get into that kind of a mindset where, you know, my interest is in football and basketball, whatever it is. But if the educational pieces are stronger, and certainly in terms of building the type of culture that I think is really important within a department. You want people to come to work every day happy to be there. And if there are issues, where coaches are kind of backstabbing each other and that sort of thing, and people are really vying for what they think is limited time, whether with the media or with the athletic director, that's just not particularly healthy. So I think it's always better to build that sense of team among your staff. And the same thing among your athletes. We've done a few things here, very purposeful things to ensure that our athletes understand we value every athlete. Our strength center it's a huge open area. We got about 11,000 square feet, and we purposely decided that we're going to have one strength training athletic performance center for all athletes, rather than this idea of there's a weight room in the hockey rink, there's a weight room in the basketball room, there's a weight room for. We really felt that isolates people and builds silos. And what we wanted our basketball players to see how our skiers were training, to see how our lacrosse players were training, so that they could really understand one another, and they could see that, hey, working just as hard as I am, and good for them. So there's I think a real value in having that kind of a spirit grow within student athlete community.
Okay, next, yes.
Okay, so with considering how much each sport brings in, when you're trying to recruit an athlete, does it make sense to give more money to an athlete, the best or the top athlete in one sport compared to the other sport?
That's the philosophical dilemma, and that's where you really do have to try to find that balance between your educational purpose and the business objectives that you have. And that doesn't make perfect sense that if our men's hockey program is generating the bulk of our revenue, we should be trying to do as much as we can for those athletes. First of all, to recruit them to Vermont, and to make sure that we're giving them every opportunity to be competitive. So it does make sense from that perspective, but then you've got to balance that with, hey, what's that going to do within the team? Are you going to create some real team dynamic issues where some athletes more than others? Does that create this? He's getting $3,000 more than I am. I'm taking the next shift off. It's not a particularly healthy, or it can be a situation that's not particularly healthy. And then when you get to the other sports where field hockey is an example. Field hockey is not a revenue producer for us, but it's still a grand part of the program.
Yeah.
It provides opportunities for 23, 24 young women, and that's important. And it's important that they be competitively challenged as well. So there's no simple answer with that one. The point is well made, but it really does become something where we've got to really kind of discuss those kinds of things we do on a very regular basis, because it's finding that balance where trying to make sure that you're being committed and consistent with your educational objective, yet not wandering too far from your business goals.
Hey, as athletic director, how do you say evaluate coaches? Is it all, is wins and losses really the end all, or?
Well, I think it's one of the things that's probably a little bit different than in certainly my experience at Calgary and at Windsor. The evaluation, the hiring and evaluation of coaches is much more important part of the director's job. And certainly the first piece in terms of hiring, that's the critical thing. You've got to hire the right person, and you've got to make sure that in the hiring process that you really are getting someone who is not simply good at what they do, but trying to assess and determine, will they be good at what they do at your institution? I am a very, very strong believer in a fit, that leadership really requires people who are in a position of leadership to have people follow them. Because if they're not following, you're not leading. And each institution presents a different set of criteria or circumstances that are either going to promote a certain type of leadership or not. So I think that the hiring process is the most important part in evaluating coaches. You got to start with someone that you think is going to be successful and has the right attributes. In terms of evaluation, all our coaches are on term definite contracts. Usually, we'll bring coaches in, depending on circumstances, with either a 4-year contract, if it's a fairly stable program. If it's something where we've had to make a change and there's a lot of instability in the program, we'll give them 5 years in that first contract. And the expectations for us certainly are, we start with, this has to be a good educational experience for our athletes. That this really needs to be something where they're going to grow as people. And you can tell if there's a fit between the style of a coach and the types of athletes you have. And here in Vermont, we have a certain type of athlete that are interested in coming here. This is a very good school academically. It's considered one of the public Ivies. So we tend to get athletes who are a little bit smarter. And with that comes their expectations are a little bit different. That they're not coming simply to play their sport. They're coming to get a good education and play their sport. So they tend to be more questioning. They tend to be more, I guess, in some ways focused. So it's important that there be that the coach is satisfying that requirement. And then we really do look at what kind of growth is occurring in the program. And certainly competitive results are one indicator. But seeing if teams, if you've gone from losing 10-0 to 3-2, that's real progress.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily equate to a win, but it shows real progress. And we operate with the principle that for anyone to change a program, to change the culture of a program, it really does take a full recruiting cycle. And that's why we'll extend them to 5 years. Because we believe that it takes that kind of time period to change the personnel and to develop the culture that you need. So our coaches are evaluated annually, and we operate on a sports supervision system where there are five associate athletic directors who each have sports that report directly to them. And part of the supervising really is to get into the weeds with the coaches on a day-to-day basis, so that you really can not only supervise them, but also mentor them and work with them to ensure that there's kind of progress being made throughout. And then all of that culminates with annual evaluations. So it's a kind of a critical piece. We also have our athletes every year, at the end of the conclusion of their season. We have a pretty comprehensive confidential questionnaire that they fill out, and that we take that data and look at trends, and that all becomes part of the coach's evaluation as well. And we try to do 360 evaluations here, where other staff are also provide feedback on coaches' performance and how they interact with other colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Pretty intensive.
it is, and I was just going to say, it's one of the most important things that we do, and it's the biggest pain in the ass that I have every year.
Okay, hey, another question. Jordan, or go there.
Because you guys aren't one of the Power 5 conferences, do you guys take like a different route of recruiting athletes and staff?
Sorry, Rob, I didn't hear.
Because you're not one of the Power 5 schools, do you take another approach with recruiting? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we do. In that, as I mentioned earlier, we have a pretty good sense of the kind of athlete who's going to thrive here, and our coaches do a very good job in terms of looking for athletes, not just looking for athletes, but looking for athletes who are going to be successful at Vermont. And that means there's a band in the spectrum that is going to work well here. And so they really focus our efforts on that band. It's not a case of we're going to go after top 100 basketball recruits, as the likelihood of them succeeding here is slim and none. So it really is understanding who you are, what you do well, and then focusing your efforts in terms of recruiting the kinds of people, kind of athletes that you think are going to be successful here. We don't spend the kind of money that some other schools do. Certainly the Power 5, that's the expenses they have. But they have coaches, they're flying all over the country every weekend. They're spending all sorts of money.
Yeah.
And we just don't think it's all that important that you do that. It's more important that you really be strategic in how you recruit. And I think that's really paid off for us. You look at our basketball program over the last 10 or 12 years. We've had very, very good success, and we've had 21 seasons every one of those years. Been to the NCAA tournament a number of times, and yet we're spending 1/4 the money that UConn is on in recruiting. because we're very strategic. It's not a cast-away net. It's focus in on, we don't have a list of 200 recruits, we have 30.
Yeah.
And that is for us certainly the best possible strategy.
Okay, Jordan.
I was gonna ask, like, athletically, what was the immediate impact, after Vermont beat Syracuse, when you mentioned that one?
Did you hear that?
No,
A little bit harder.
Can you just say it?
Okay. You guys beat Syracuse in the NCAA basketball. What the impact it had on your school?
quite a bit actually. And actually, this last year we lost to Duke by 1 in Cameron, which was almost. In fact, we put a shot out which went in, but the buzzer went. Otherwise, we would have won that game. But games like that mean a great deal to schools like ours. In that, when I talked earlier about providing national profile and what happens with the enrollment after you have those kinds of moments, that win over Syracuse really did kind of lay the foundation for the program for ever since. That it kind of gave us great positive profile, and it was one of those times where the media really did help in that the way they portrayed Vermont is exactly what we are. That we were this little, the little engine that could, that just is what this place is like, and it has enabled us really to continue developing the basketball program since then. It's had a significant impact on the number of applications. Our student, the reach of our students is now far greater than it was prior to that. We were much more New England based, but now we really are getting to that point where our students come from all 50 states and a number of international students now. So it had a very significant impact on the university, and certainly did on the basketball program also. It's one of those things that we're probably going to be talking about the Syracuse 10 years from now as well. It's just one of those feel-good moments that a lot and really did unify the whole state around the program.
Okay. Next, Michael.
How does your school deal with ineligible players? Is there different treatment for better caliber players with violations?
Did you get that?
No.
Academic eligibility and with,
Yep.
and with how do you guys deal with that with athletes?
Well, much like with hiring good coaches, it really begins with who you admit. And we do not have any special admits at the University of Vermont. All of our athletes go through the same admissions process as every other student. So it is I think it starts with bringing people that you feel are going to be successful here. That's who you recruit. And if you do that, you're starting at a much better place than if you're bringing in at-risk students. So that's step number 1 is just, it's the old computer adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you bring in good students, chances are much greater that they're going to be successful academically. Then, once you get them here, you have to appreciate and understand that we really demand a lot from them in terms of training and travel and all the things that they have to do. And we have community service requirements for them in terms of their social development and citizenship. So there's a lot of demands that we place on them in terms of time and energy and effort. So if we're going to do that, we have to provide support systems to help them. So we have a very active student athlete services unit where that's where they're getting mentoring, academic support, advice, et cetera, et cetera. And we think when you put those two things together with good students coming in and a very robust student athlete services program, the chances are pretty good that you're not going to be in a position where you have students who are academically ineligible. The result for us has been for the last 13 years, I think 26 consecutive semesters, the student athlete GPA has been higher than the student body GPA. And the student athlete graduation rates are about 6 percentage points higher than the general student graduation rates. So we take that part of it very seriously, but think that there's two keys to it. One is, as I said, bringing in good people and giving them the support they need when they're here. I would think, Rob, that in the 10 years or 13 years I've been here, we wouldn't have had more than a dozen athletes who are academically ineligible all that time.
Okay. So again, it tells you kind of the school he's at. Okay, who else? Question? Yes, in the back.
What's your view on frats? And have you seen the video of the Indiana University frat scandal that came out yesterday?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing the questions.
He's asking about frats, your opinion on those, and again, the scandal he says that came out yesterday at Indiana. I haven't heard about it, but.
It might be a little bit better just to change that just a little bit, and rather than talk specifically about fraternities, just expand and talk about hazing, which I think is probably part of your thought process. First of all, in terms of fraternities, they're not a key part of campus here. Fraternities are much more ingrained in university life in the Midwest and in the South. In the Northeast and in the West, they're just, we have some fraternities here. There probably wouldn't be 10% of our students who are fraternity members. I do think in a lot of ways, some can be very, very beneficial. Those professional fraternities certainly, but I think the social fraternities they're waning, and as I said, there's pockets of popularity, but not at all in the Northeast. With regard to the whole issue of hazing, which I think fraternities can get themselves wrapped up in, as do athletic teams. And I think the incident in Indiana wasn't so much hazing, but just regular old stupidity. But in full disclosure, in 2000, 2 years before I came here, the University of Vermont was involved in a very serious hazing scandal with our men's hockey team, to the point where the hockey season was canceled, and the state passed legislation banning hazing within the state. So it really was a big deal here. And for a hockey program with the kind of profile and success that Vermont had, to have the entire season canceled, that was a pretty dramatic thing. But since then, we've really been the beneficiaries of the outcome from that hazing scandal, in that there are now very, very rigid, stringent rules. We have so much more in the way of resources being directed to ensure that our athletes engage in hazing. And I think that that's been very positive for us, that the focus has been, for us, is around, what are the, supposedly, hazing is supposed to bring a team together, and, it makes you tougher and all that sort of stuff. We've looked at what the outcome of what happened back in 2000 and said, what was positive about that? It was divisive within the team. It created so many problems. So what are the things that we could and should be doing that really do bring people, that really do create a bond within a team? And we have educational programs that are focused on helping teams to understand the kinds of things that they can do. So it's just that much more of taking a positive approach to, rather than really degrading and belittling people, what can you do to make them feel good about being part of the group? I think it's a much more positive, much more progressive way to deal with it. But sadly, hazing continues within fraternities to a large extent, and within a lot of athletic programs. And every year, see another team that loses their season for hazing scandals. And it's not just, ironically, it's not just males. More recent hazing scandals with college teams have been with female teams. And I just do not understand why we haven't been able to make progress with that at some of these places. I feel very, very good about where we are here, and I think that the lesson that we learned back in 2000 was so severe that we're pretty confident that it's not something that's ever going to happen here again.
I think that has to do with, again, bringing in the right people, the right coaches that understand that doesn't build, say, team unity. Okay, who else? Question? Tristan?
Do you favor one sports team over another?
Already asked
Or are they all equal?
No, you already answered that.
Already asked that.
Another one.
Way to pay attention, Tristan. Must be a baseball player.
Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, we've all been asked.
Jordan? Any other questions then?
How do you feel about the Blue Jays?
How do you feel about the Blue Jays?
Well, I guess it's time for all Canadians to jump on the bandwagon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah!
We got some baseball players in the class here.
Oh, okay.
What kind of players do you recruit? Yes.
I was just wondering what the situation's like how many Canadians you have playing there?
Okay, how many Canadians do you have on campus there playing varsity?
Actually, quite a few. And both men's and women's hockey. Men's and women's basketball, both teams. Both men and women's lacrosse. We have a heavy Canadian contingent on the ski team. Track and field. Field hockey. I think really most of our teams have Canadians. I would say we probably have out of 425 or so athletes, we've probably got 50 Canadians.
Would they all be on full rides, or that varies?
No, it really does vary. Certainly there are some that are on full scholarship, and then we have some that run partial, and I know there are a few walk-ons as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Tiffany, what do you got? Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to hear me, but do you think your role in college athletics is the most important
college athletics within your organization is the most important? And if it isn't, whose is?
Well, you know, I think, without being too corny about it, the most important, person in the operation is the student athlete. You know, that's what we're here for, and they really are the most important person in the whole process. I think the rest of us, we play different roles in terms of ensuring that their experience, their growth, what they get out of the program, that's our role. We have different roles. Certainly, the leadership role is different from what coaches do. You know, I kind of think of it from my own perspective of I don't get paid for what I do. I get paid for getting other people to do, and that's important. But it's no less important than coaches and what they do, and our academic staff and training staff. So it really is. I think you know, it's more an issue of having an organization that's functional and that is really focused on the center of it all, which is the student athlete.
Okay. Hey, any other questions? Yes, at the back there.
So, the student athlete commits to a school but then wishes to withdraw and attend another. What are the appropriate steps required to opt out?
Did you hear that one?
No. Oh.
Okay. Again?
So, if the student athlete commits to a school but then wishes to withdraw and attend another, what are the appropriate steps required to opt out?
If a student applies to a school or commits to a school and then all of a sudden decides to opt out of it, what are the requirements that they have to go through?
Well, there's a couple of different levels, and the first being that when an athlete commits to a school, usually it starts with a verbal commitment. That's one of those things that really is. It's more about integrity. That you don't make a commitment until you're really making a commitment. So it's very, very infrequent when you would have an athlete make a commitment and then back out. But they could. They could do that if they chose. But once they sign a national letter of intent, then it's much more difficult. That they really are, they're really bound to that school. And if they want to go elsewhere, then there is a process that they have to go through, and that really requires time and effort. And if the school does not wish to let them go, it can be problematic. It can require that they can go someplace else, but they're not eligible for a year. So it's you know, it really is it's kind of a two-part thing. As you said, the verbal commitment is really much more an ethical consideration, whereas once you sign the national letter of intent, then the NCAA becomes involved, and there are consequences for not showing up at the floor.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
What's the favorite part of your job?
What's the favorite part of your job? The games on the weekend.
Yeah, you know, it really is.
Yeah.
I think, other than speaking to St. Clair College students on a Friday morning, that's one of the favorite things. But it is just being on a college campus is such a great thing, and to have spent to spend your professional career on campus around young people who really are, they're high energy, they're accomplished, they're successful. That really does a lot in terms of just how you feel about yourself. So I greatly enjoy the environment that we have the good fortune to work in, and it's just a treat to be doing this job. There are things that you have to do that they're not particularly sexy or glamorous or whatnot, but those are things that you have to do. But by far, the majority of each and every day is one that's really just enjoyable. The kind of people you work with, the kind of people you deal with. It really does. It just is made for a wonderful professional life.
Okay, good. Who else?
What's
Questions?
the weather like?
What's that?
What's the weather like there?
What's the weather like there?
It's we moved here from Minnesota, so we moved to a warmer climate, sure. It's it's not much different than Southern Ontario. We're only we're like 50 minutes from the border here. We can be in downtown Montreal in 90 minutes. So it's very similar kind of climate. I know Windsor is a little bit more mild, being down in the banana belt there, but there's not a lot of difference what you would find in Toronto or Ottawa or Montreal. But it certainly is got great skiing here, and that's one of the things that is incredible is just our ski team. They're very competitive. They've won a number of national championships. We had a couple of our skiers who were actually skiing for Canada in Sochi.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else questions? No? No? Okay, I think that is probably it. Okay. Thank you. Actually, a first for me, but it's actually really, I thought, real educational for our students. And I think, again, these are second-year sport management students. Again, you've been in the field. Would you give any, say, last words of wisdom to these students and hopefully going out into the industry in a couple of years?
I think it's a wonderful career. As they say, you're around high-achieving people. It's exciting. There's so much on the upside with it. Recognize that there's a lot of things that you might not particularly enjoy doing, but that's part of the business. That you really do need to, in a lot of ways, pay your dues. And one of the things I advise you to do is, anytime you get an opportunity to volunteer for an event, or to intern with a program or with a team or anything of that sort, do everything you can to get every bit of experience. You would be surprised at the number of times, and I certainly know here, the number of people we have hired because we've had connection with them as interns or undergrad students or whatever, or volunteers. Those things really make a huge difference. And this is a business where there are so many opportunities for that kind of to get that kind of experience. So I really encourage you to take every opportunity you can to work and get more experience. And you're not going to step into an athletic director's job in 2 years' time. You're going to have to pay some dues, but they can be a lot of fun paying those dues along the way.
Yeah, wise words.
Good luck.
Okay, hey, thank you so much, Bob. Say hello to Libby for me.
Will do. Take care, Rob.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.